Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. You are hopefully alive and in tune to our Once Club in Conversation With. Today we're joined by the lovely Caroline Stenning, who is a former colleague of mine from back in the day at Topshop and Net-a-Porter, I believe, and is also a founder of an amazing stationery company. And today we're going to be talking about, her career journey, how she started, how she's transitioned from, personal shopping and styling into a more commercial styling role at one of the, biggest online digital companies around, and what it's also like to straddle that alongside a startup, two very small gorgeous children, and a husband, of course. So hi Kaz, lovely to see you.
Hello, Dom. Thank you so much for having me. When you asked me, I was so touched. I was like, oh, I've got things to say, I think.
So thank you. I think you have a really interesting, you've had a really interesting career trajectory. Even at the time that I knew you, you were doing some really cool things, and it was also quite unique in what I think the Topshop personal shopping service brought to to the industry at the time, and then to also then transition into what, and we'll talk about this later, whether or not it's something that's quite similar but also quite different at the same time. And I think it will be really interesting for our members and our viewers to kind of know what that transition is like, just because in my experience I found that sometimes there's quite a division, although and it's not as easily transferable sometimes from role to role when it comes to hiring. So it'll just be interesting to know what you're taking as that. And one of the things that we also focus on with our members is that a lot of the time, that if this is not their main job, it's kind of their side hustle, if they will, and kind of, or they're thinking about embarking into a new business and to kind of taking control of their own sort of company, for example, full time. And I think also you've got great insight as that, because you've also been working so hard with Stengun Drawings, which has been, I've seen you guys go from like, oh, we're doing some cute little print cards, and I remember when you were like, oh, we're being stocked at a coffee shop, and now you guys are online and you're doing huge prints, and you're doing these huge So tell me, you are what was your journey like? How did you start? Did you know you wanted to get into personal shopping? How did you find yourself at Topshop at that time, when Oxford Street Topshop was kind of part hangout, part club, part fashion hub?
It really was that club part, for sure. Yeah. Well, obviously I was having a little think about that this question coming up, and it's crazy. Like I started at Topshop Oxford Circus. That was my first job after coming out of uni, which I did a fine art degree. Okay. I finished uni and felt like I needed to, I didn't want to pursue art at that point. Everybody was kind of doing very conceptual things, and deep down I just wanted to paint, but I felt like I wasn't quite good enough. And I've always been into fashion. I felt like I needed to kind of pursue that in some way. I knew I didn't want to be like a fashion designer. And I didn't know much about buying or merchandising or anything like that at all. I basically, this is obviously a long time ago, 2004, and there weren't personal shopping services all over the place. It would have been Harrods and big stores with luxury products. So I wasn't really aware of what a stylist was, or like a celebrity stylist or anything like that at all. And I was, at that time, I was like quite a big Kylie Minogue fan, and I think I watched like this documentary about her, and she and the documentary was a lot about her and this stylist, and I actually had to Google it because I couldn't remember his name, but his name was William Baker, and I think he's still doing stuff to this day. And I was like, wow, that's a brilliant job. He just gets to dress Kylie like every single day, and that's his job. So then I kind of then realized, well, there's this role called a stylist. What's this? And I lived quite near Bluewater Shopping Centre, which is in Kent, and so I would kind of go into the Topshop there all the time, and there was a pamphlet for this Styliviser service, and I was like, what's that? That sounds amazing. And I was, a massive fan of Topshop, as probably everybody was back then. So I found out about that. I then obviously saw that there were vacancies at 2 on 4, which is Oxford Circus, and that was it. I was just my kind of mindset was on that. I was like, absolutely have to get this. Really want to get this job, and it was actually an assistant job, and oh my word, that job just absolutely changed my life. I loved it. I loved being an assistant. I loved getting cups of coffee for people. I loved putting stuff back on the shop floor. I mean, I'd get lost half the time, but it didn't matter. And like you said, it was like a club. There was, this music and the big screens, and sometimes I get really distracted and just watch the big screens of the new videos. But throughout my sort of journey there, I progressed to a styliviser, then a senior styliviser, then I became a regional assistant manager, and that's when we worked together at Westfield. And Dom, I have a photo. I found it. This is when we worked together.
Oh, so cute!
So yeah, I think, I don't know what this was for, but I'm your styliviser and you're my client, but I can't remember why. Why did we pose for this photo? But
I love it. I love the classic Kaz bun there as well.
Oh my gosh, my bleach blonde hair that I'd never.
I love. I can't believe you have that. That's amazing.
I remember that I had it somewhere, and I had a look through it last night, and I was like, I found it. So that's when we worked together at Shepherd's Bush.
Yeah.
What was that? 2010, I think ish.
I think I started that role in end of 2008, and I think by the time you were assistant manager, I think that was like 2009. But you helped us set up. Specifically, and so that was so the first day I was on the job was the first day I met you, and it was like, we got to sort this room out. And I think myself and the girls, it was crazy. Because also the centre was also launching that day, and then the store wasn't quite ready. There was lots of stuff that wasn't actually fixed at the back of house. The lifts didn't work. It was pandemonium. But you got to be ready, and it was just kind of it was nuts. I remember that day as well, the first day opening, and I think you were like, oh, go on your lunch. And I remember there was nowhere to actually eat lunch. So I was because it was just there were so many people back there helping, that it was people were sort of eating in the corridors, and you had to it was nuts. But it was such a big deal then, because no one was really doing what Topshop was doing, I suppose, at that time.
No, absolutely not. Because I mean, at that point, the Styliviser service was huge. It was, it was nationwide, and I was looking after all the services that were in the south of England. So I would sort of travel around to all those different stores like Bristol, Cardiff, Brighton. I think there was one down there.
Norwich as well, randomly. There was Wales. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, it was all over. So it was a lot of traveling, and then and then we had a bit of a shift, didn't we? Philip Green. Yes. I don't know what he didn't like it or something. I'm not quite sure. He wanted to completely change it, rebrand it, bring in new people, and I think he wanted it more like this, luxury personal shopping service, where you do have a client base, and you are, you're calling them, you're texting them, you're telling them that this new collection's in. Whereas when it was Styliviser, it was very much about helping out, this young girl that's got 80 quid budget, and she goes away ecstatic that she's got this amazing Topshop look. But it changed, and it became a lot more about like I said, having a client base and bringing those people in. So it was different, I definitely sort of really liked that Styliviser side to it. I know personally I got a little bit overwhelmed with the targets that we had to do weekly, and I was just like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to make this target. But you know, I think I did that for about, so I became a personal shopper basically, instead of a manager, and I think I did that for like a year or year and a half, I think it was, and I just turned 30, and I was just kind of thinking, where do I want to go? You know, I'd kind of had this moment where I was a manager for a bit, and then I wasn't again, so it was kind of like, yeah, what's my next step really? And I actually, this is when like e-commerce and online styling was just starting as well. I feel like I've kind of started things, you know, organically at the right time. So and there was this role at Selfridges, but it was a menswear stylist, and I was like, wow, I don't really have a lot of you know, experience in menswear. I mean, I'm not going to lie, when I was at Topshop, I'd sometimes sneak up to Top Man, and I was a bit of an indie girl back in the day, so like the Killers were up there, and I'd run up and see, oh, would you like some help? And the Kings of Leon were there, and I'd be like, hey. So
and isn't that also how you met your husband? Am I not mistaken? He actually worked on the Top Man.
That's right. Yes, my husband Brett. I mean, this is why Topshop just changed my life. It's not just, you know, professionally. I met my husband there. He was a Top Man stylist, and yes, I can't remember what year we met, but yeah, I mean, the rest is history. We're married. We've got 2 kids, and so yeah, I mean, I'd go up there as well just to say hello to him too. But yeah, so I mean, there was, you know, there was this kind of like menswear interest, but I didn't necessarily have, you know, the experience. But I think because that role and, you know, e-com styling was so new, I think there wasn't a lot of people that did have that experience either. So, you know, I think me coming from a personal shopping background, you know, that was fully, you know, accepted, and it was kind of like, well, you know, that's an interesting background to then, you know, go into online styling instead. So yeah, so I moved on to Selfridges, and that was quite a change, because obviously I've been at Topshop for 6 or 7 years, and it was, you know, it was my life, my, you know, friends were there. I think my husband had left at that point. You know, so it was all I'd ever known, and you know, I was quite well established there because I had been there so long as well. You know, I knew I was going to miss the uniform discount. I knew that, you know, I had actually done a bit of traveling other than the southern of England when I was at Topshop. They sent me to New York once, and I went to the Philippines, and I went to Singapore to kind of help set up services there. So, you know, there were so many great perks and you know, exciting things that had happened, but it just felt like the right time to sort of start a new challenge.
It was definitely a sad day when you left. I remember when you were like, I'm going to Selfridges, and I was like, oh no. Because it was such a huge machine, like, you know, I think, you know, if you don't have the context of working in a company like that, because it is so regional, national, like even the areas of Topshop, so you're not just part of like your sort of Oxford Street 214, you've got your kind of area. I think people area, if I'm not mistaken, it was area 52 or something, but you have the area, so that's all the surrounding, like the Knightsbridge stores, White City, High Street, because there was a real group of people, and then everyone sort of moves around as well, so you actually have this huge extended life of everyone. And so when you meet people who really stand out, I think it was like you said, you were very established, so I think when you left, people were a bit like, oh no, we were excited for you, but we were also sad for ourselves, for sure, because you were so part of that kind of DNA of you know, what that style advisor / personal shopping team had been with. And not just that, because so much of the personal shopping also was like mixed with the PR and the marketing, so there was a lot of celebrity stuff going on there. We did so many things with events as well, so there was such a weave of it that it was like, oh no, oh, she's going, all right.
Oh, I mean, I felt the same. I was like, what am I doing? And actually, I took quite a big pay cut going to Selfridges.
Really? Yeah.
I remember my dad being like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have to do it, you know, and just see where it goes. And obviously it was a good risk to take. I think sometimes you have to take those kind of risks to just see where it can go.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I loved Topshop. It was just wonderful, and you know, it breaks my heart that it's gone now. It's just
Yeah, me too.
I can't fathom it. You know, that store was, you know, I think I worked there when it was the Mecca. You know, there was no stores in America, so all the celebrities came to us. You know, not to boast, but I met so many celebrities. You know, you just like I think about it yesterday. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I forgot that I met that person. You know,
it's insane, the hysteria that came with it, and like you go there now and it's closed, and it's the saddest thing ever, because I can't think of one other store that could even match it. But I was even saying, like, even when you would sort of meet like a friend or someone in Oxford Street, and whoever gets there first, and you call them, where are you? I'm in Topshop. Like, without a doubt, you're always waiting. Someone's waiting in Topshop. You're doing the accessory floor. There's a DJ in there. There's really great. Like, it was a hub for sure. To me, I mean, what were some of your favorite parts? Because there's a story that I continue to dine out on, and I wasn't even there. But I remember you coming in on like a Monday and telling me about Beyonce coming on a Saturday, and that's like my favorite story.
Oh my word! I mean, that was I mean, you didn't know these people were coming either, so like you would possibly not be wearing your best. I mean, every day I kind of dressed up anyway, but you know, you'd just be like, it would be sprung on you. You know, the press department would call you and say like, oh, you know, yeah, Beyonce's coming in, or Kate Moss is coming in. You just be like, oh my god. Beyonce was just a crazy experience, because she wanted to go on the shop floor, and I remember being like, well, please don't, like, I'll bring stuff to you, because you just knew that people were going to go crazy, and they did. You know, she had the entourage around her, but then it was just, I don't blame them. I mean, it's Beyonce, you know, come on. And it just swarmed, but it's really interesting to meet people like that. She was so graceful, really quiet. You know, she wasn't Sasha Fierce. It was very but my funny story from that is that I kind of done this appointment for hours and hours and hours, and I was due to finish like hours ago, and my husband Brett was up in Top Man, and he'd just finished his shift, and he came down and he's like, oh, can I help, like, shall I put these things in bags? And then I was like, yeah, and then I'd gone, and then Beyonce left, and she went up to Brett and she went, thank you so much. And I was just like, what? I was like, I did all the hard work and you got the thank you. But it's just crazy. You're not trained to meet these superstars, so you know, you're trying to keep yourself composed, but inside you're like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it was very surreal.
I always found that it was quite strange, actually, that being in that role, and you weren't quite ready. You knew a lot, like you said, like, because of the type of product, there was Topshop was that main brand that was so adjacent to luxury. You know, all the stars, all the models, what have you, were essentially wearing their sort of Balenciaga, their McQueen, etc., with something from Topshop or Topman. So it was really the only place that you were seeing that all the time. So it wasn't that so much of a surprise that they were shopping there. But when you started to becoming like used to meeting these people, and I was always very surprised at how composed I was when they actually turned up, because I'd be like, oh, it's just normal, you know, and it would be huge people, and then you just have like, and then all of a sudden you're just being like, this is me being regular.
Yeah.
You know, there was Ronnie Wood came once, and I remember I sort of helped him. He wanted to go out for a quick smoke break in between his styling session, and they were like, you know, take him, and I was like, so my nan saw you in concert when she was a teenager. Don't know what you know, it's just really random, and here I am in the loading dock, just being really like, we're just really normal. And it was like a really bizarre situation, but you would be, like you said, you would work flat out, but you would kind of leave happy. Everything's on the shop floor. Was there anything that you found, you know, super challenging with working in that kind of environment, or did you sort of thrive off of all of it?
I mean, I'd probably say the Stylivizer days. I know. I mean, I thrived on it. I didn't mind the crazy hours. I didn't mind, if you had to work up later because, there was this mad appointment.
Yeah.
I just loved it. I loved going in. I loved who I worked with. I think there's so many times in the fashion industry that you hear that people can be a bit snobbish or whatever, but everyone just loved each other, and it was a really lovely friendship, across the board. I guess it was probably just that last year where the service had changed a lot, and I kind of found that quite difficult to change with it, and I think it was because I'm not very competitive, and there was this sort of, there was this target, and there was actually this leaderboard of how much everyone had made, and I'd just be like, oh God, I'm all bottom or second from bottom. So I guess that, for me, I loved being quite honest and suggesting, looks for people rather than being like, I know that's a little bit more expensive, so I'm going to push that one, not saying that went on all the time, but, it just felt, I think that first service, it felt a lot more sort of, honest, and you weren't sort of out to make loads of money in a way. So yeah, I think that was my biggest challenge.
Yeah, the irony is actually that I think with that change was that before, because the focus wasn't on the sales, it was on the appointments, I think relationships were built and the foundations, etc., were built, and actually from that became why we were so successful. And then the minute it kind of flipped, all of a sudden it became such a different perspective and a different challenge. But how did you find, one of the things I definitely I remember taking from you, just like that, because you said you're not competitive, it was more about finding that the way of making sure that the customer left happy every time, and that was such a great way to learn how to really build on your presence with a client and to build relationships and rapport. It wasn't about the sale, it was about them, and that always kind of came through in your service. But is there any other things that you did where you found you were able to kind of ensure that clients would come back? Because obviously, that was the other beauty of, I suppose, working within a Topshop environment, was that it was what's the foot traffic is such a big part of that. You're guaranteed to find clients or to find new clients because people always come in, but really, how do you go from having that first appointment to then having someone come back to you in that environment?
I guess, when it was that first rendition of the service, that was almost an impossibility. That Oxford Street store was, the service, it was just always booked, and it wasn't about repeat people. It was about it was just like hot property. I remember the bookings used to open on a Sunday, and you'd be up in reception, and it was just constant calls to book appointments. So there wasn't that kind of then relationship. You just your client went. They went home happy, but you just kind of knew you weren't going to see them again because it would just be impossible. But so then that kind of switch. So that was a positive switch to the personal shopping. It was very much about getting to know them about that during that appointment, and then really sort of taking a mental note of what they might like in the future. And you had an assistant as well, so it kind of, you were like this little team where, if I'd missed something, my assistant would be like, oh, Kaz, there's this new something from Topshop Boutique or Unique, and so is going to love that. So it was kind of maybe I could get on with the appointment, and then the assistant would call up your client. So there was two of you on it. You could build more of a relationship and get people to come back in, and obviously it was encouraged by management, whereas that old service, it was like no, just anybody who's first come first serve, that's their appointment. But it very much encouraged that you had a certain amount of pre-booked appointments, but then the rest of it you had to fill that and get your clients to come back. And it wasn't difficult. Again, Topshop was so hot still then. people wanted to come in there and use that beautiful room, like the makeover that room had. It was just, you know, I mean, sometimes it was a bit oppressive. There was no windows, but generally, it, you know. Oh, sorry, something's come up on my some kind of update. Oh. Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, but you're right. There was such an oasis within this kind of like 4th floor, you know, museum of clothes and activity that actually you'd come in and you step off, and it was this real sense of luxury with high street sort of appointments, and it was crazy. You know, it was absolutely nuts. So when you kind of moved to Selfridges to kind of do the online styling, you know, how was the transition there for you? Like, what were the main differences or challenges that you had?
I mean, very, very different. You know, it was very much it was not customer facing at all. We did have to, you'd basically get like your rail of product that needed to be uploaded. And then you had to then go on the shop floor and pick what you wanted to style with it. So that was your only sort of shop floor you know, experience for that day. It was actually then going up to the people that worked at, you know, McQueen, being like, can I borrow these trousers, please? So, and it was kind of like you styled it one day and shot it the next day. And it was just, it was just mind blowing. You know, you were having to work with, you know, models, and obviously it was male models, and, you know, I hadn't worked with male models. So, you know, it was just like, oh, you're seeing a naked man every 2 seconds, you know, whereas now I'm just like, oh, put this on, you know. So yeah, it was very, very different, but it wasn't overwhelming, because it was because again, it was quite new. It was very chilled. We had too much space, really. I know now that they've sort of shoved in more studios into that kind of one space. So it was quite relaxed, and again, everybody there was really quite welcoming. You know, I think probably the biggest challenge is the fact that I hadn't had this huge amount of menswear background, you know. I think I was still getting my head around of you know, who was buying that particular piece. You know, Selfridges had just like so many brands, you know. They really sort of had a lot more sort of streetwear brands before a lot of other, you know, these other places now have them. So you'd have, you know, this really dowdy Ralph Lauren polo, but then you'd also have, you know, Off-White. So it was kind of like trying to adjust your mind as to, you know, who is buying all these individual brands, and knowing sort of how to style them. So I guess that was my challenge to start off with, the fact that I hadn't had so much interaction with like men and you know, clients and things like that.
How many looks did you have to style a day?
You know what, it changed so much there. You know, I think so it would fluctuate, because they'd be like, actually, there was one thing that I did put into place. It was the formal wear. I basically got obsessed. You know, when I got more comfortable and into it, I loved tailoring. I loved formal wear. And I think it was because it was such a win when you got it looking right. Like when a suit is styled badly, it just makes me want to puke, you know. I mean, the trousers are too long, or, you know, the tie hasn't got a dimple. Like, so when you get all those elements right, it's just like, yes, this looks so good. But yeah, with things like that, you'd kind of say, look, we need to shoot less because this takes time, you know. It really did. It was so fiddly. As soon as the model moved, you're like, oh gosh, I've got to like redo it all again. But yeah, there was no sort of fixed number. It was very, I'm sure they have something more in place now, but it was all quite, it used to fluctuate a bit.
Crazy. And it's interesting you said about the menswear, because I had a similar experience. I went from, you know, exclusively doing women pretty much, with the exception of maybe like here, you know, the odd person here and there, until I moved to Farfetch. And all of a sudden it was like, yeah, you're doing men and women, and that had never been a thing before. And it was and everyone I think assumes it's just like, you know, both because it's fashion and the approach is the same, and all of a sudden you were just kind of thrown into this it's a whole different world. And I always found myself quite you know, dare I say, a bit uninterested in menswear, I suppose, because I was just like, with women, you know, it's hats and it's accessories and it's flourishes and it's, you know, there's always like a newness, I think, or a freshness, but and with men it was a bit different. But the one thing I can agree with you is tailoring was like I think that was like my real pull-in point of like, actually this is really exciting to kind of zone in on tailoring and suits, and like, you know, there's something that was always the really exciting part of styling, and especially if it's with clients who or brands, I suppose, that want to push the boundaries, whether it's fabric or style, or, you know, kind of maybe leaning more into kind of references, you know, like for example what you see with Gucci men's is fantastic because they push that meant to kind of be a little bit more irreverent, I suppose, rather than kind of traditional. Which is always exciting. So how long were you at Selfridges before you went to Mr. Porter?
That was 3 years. Felt like longer, actually, not in a bad way, just like I think because I've done quite big stints at places, but yeah, so but that was obviously quite a huge part of my career because of the, you know, switch from women's to menswear, and also the switch from personal shopping to, you know, econ styling. So I started at Mr. Porter in 2014. So how many years is that? Is that 7 years?
6 or 7. So what, you know, do you have any tips if there was someone who was, say, wanting to switch, whether it's from styling, online styling, to personal shopping, or personal shopping to online styling? You know, what kind of, now that you've done it and you've been in it, like what kind of tips would you advise?
I think maybe the way you know, the switch that I did, so obviously personal shopping to econ styling, you know, I think I got a little bit lucky with that. But what I would suggest to anybody now is actually sort of building a bit of a portfolio. You know, and you know, doing it on your day off, doing it after work, you know, and just building something. You know, it doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, singing and dancing, but you know, there's a lot of you know, photographers that, you know, will work, you know, and we have Instagram now, you know, like that was not non-existent back in my day.
You're right. Yeah,
sometimes I think that's a good thing. But you know, you can just network with people, and you know, get a couple of test shoots in, and just, you know, have a bit of a portfolio. So you know, I think, as you know, from my point of view as a hiring manager now, I like to see different backgrounds. You know, I don't want to be that person that's like, they have got the exact right you know, credentials and background that I want to see, you know, because I know that my journey, I moved and I didn't necessarily have the right experience. I think it's more interesting to have people that have different backgrounds, and you know, can what's that term when you transferable skills. Because I think obviously a lot of it is about, you know, work ethic and personality, and you know, just because you've got the exact, well, you know, you were a stylist at Matches doesn't necessarily mean that you know, it's you're going to be perfect here. You know, what's your work ethic like, etc. So I'm really sorry, I forgot what your question was.
No, you answered it perfectly. You were saying what kind of tips and you were talking about what kind of tips you do if you wanted to do like a switch from one to the other. But I think, like you said, there are transferable skills there, so I suppose it's about knowing, you know, how to hand that up, and to be able to present that, you know, to a person like yourself as a hiring manager, and to show you that you have that skill set. Because I get, from what I understand from online styling, and I've done very little of it, is that there's a sense of having creativity, but you also have to be on brand at the same time, and it's straddling the two, right?
Absolutely, yes, yeah. That it's a very, it's super interesting, because that's what I always look for. I want, you know, the looks at Mr. Porter to be interesting and pushing it, but at the same time, it's got to be commercial. You've got to be able to make that customer identify what that is and be like, yes, I can see myself wearing that. You know, it does still have to be commercial. So it's a balance for sure.
Because you're sort of projecting to a certain sense of the masses for a globalized Mr. Porter customer, I guess, as opposed to if you were a stylist, it's, you know, that's one customer at one time, at one point. That being said, you always want to be able to know that if there is maybe a non-Mr. Porter customer or someone, you know, who'll go, oh, I want to click on that, you know, it has to feel that they're going to have that initial reaction that I want to look at what that looks like, I want to see what other pieces they are. So which is very similar to being, you know, that personal stylist. You want to be able to kind of click into things that the client likes and also push their boundaries at the same time.
Totally. Yeah, because you want to draw new customers in, you know. It's everything evolves and you don't want to just keep doing what you've always done and keep appealing to the same people. It's you know, we need to get younger people in, the Gen Z or Z or whatever, you know, we need to keep
whatever we're on.
yeah, God knows, I don't even know what I am. So yeah, it's just, and keeping up with you know, that kind of current ness, I'm sure that's not a word, but you know, just keeping your eye on kind of what's going on out there as well.
Absolutely. So as we mentioned before, you also, you know, if you're not busy enough, you thought, hey, let me start a new business, let's start Stengun Drawings. How did that come about? Tell us what stationery company is. I want to know everything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, as if I haven't got enough going on. I mean, Brett and I just said the other day, like, what did we used to talk about when we didn't have this? Like, it's just, especially him, he's constant thinking and talking about it. So we work on it together. Obviously, I didn't start it. I just started painting. There was no intention of starting a small business at all. That's not me. You know, I'm way too like, oh, that's a risk, no way. It's Instagram, you know. I just started putting like, you know, at that time they were silly little drawings. I think I was doing like birds and some kind of like plant, starting to sort of do stuff around plants, and just started an Instagram, and then I just started to get, you know, likes and, you know, nice feedback, and I was like, oh, this is nice, isn't it? And then I actually got a few commissions, and I think that's when, and they, you know, as wonderful as they were very time consuming. So it felt like, right, what's a way of, you know, presenting this artwork but not having to do commissions? And then, you know, you never see them again. They go off to whoever's commissioned it and you don't see it again. So that's when like the greeting card idea came. And I think the first one I did, it was kind of raising money for, I think it was someone's marathon run at that time. And then, you know, it just became a bit addictive. I'm like, oh, I want to do another one. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing at all. And, you know, that's when Brett gets involved. You know, he's way more sort of, well, he's just generally a bit more clever with things like that. You know, I like painting and he knows kind of, you know, the logistics of things. So, you know, he'd start to get involved in, you know, making these designs into cards, and then he'd get more involved in like the composition of them, and then he set up a website, and then we did a trade show, and it just kind of all like snowballed. It was very, very organic, nothing, there was no sort of, you know, business plan. I mean, there is more of a business plan now and where we want it to go. So yeah, and now, you know, and then we, yeah, like you said earlier, we had one stockist and a coffee shop in, you know, close to us, and then it's just kind of gradually got bigger and bigger. I mean, there, you know, we have approached lots of people, you know, we have done it that way, but obviously been discovered on Instagram as well. So yeah, and it's great. We love it. You know, and Brett works on it full time, and just, you know, that kind of feeling of having your own you know, project that you're working on, it's all consuming. You know, it's kind of, there's no 9 till 5 here. It's very, you know, we'd be packing cards at midnight. I mean, not really at the moment. You know, we've got a newborn, so, you know, it's kind of working around him and his sleep and feeds. But yeah, it's really fun. It feels like this real, you know, circle. I've kind of gone back to, you know, what I originally studied in, which was, you know, fine art.
And you said that you wanted to paint, but you didn't know.
Yeah,
You kind of just found it. How ironic.
yeah. And I'm pleased that it's now, not then, because, you know, without all these social media tools, you know, it just would have fallen flat, I would have thought, because, you know, I wouldn't have, you know, I do have a certain amount of drive, but I also, if I feel something's not working, I'm like, oh, done, throw the towel in. So I feel like this has been a really good time to, you know, start it. And yeah, and it's just exciting to see where it's going to go as well. You know, who knows?
I think it has so much promise because it is really based around, I mean, first of all, obviously it's really based around botanicals and that kind of theme, which obviously lends itself to a lot, but also I think because it's, in my opinion, and I will mention that this print here is a Stengun original, that I actually asked my parents to get me for Christmas, because I was like, I really, it always makes me just feel really happy, and I'm always kind of like feeling like a certain vibe, but I think that it's always around that idea of you know, the craft itself, you know, the colors, the saturation, so you can always, and that can go anywhere.
Yeah.
As we saw when you started talking about the Cuban shirt project.
Yeah,
super exciting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, this is a project that it didn't happen in the end, but it will. Like, I'm so confident that it will. I'm obsessed with shirts, Hawaiian shirts, Cuban shirts, and we designed a houseplant shirt. We haven't really seen any sort of Hawaiian shirts that had you know, houseplant designs on it. It was all, you know, very, you know, even though essentially a houseplant is a tropical plant, but, you know, it was all very much like tropical scenes, you know, like boats and palm trees and you know, people in the ocean and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but we had to do a Kickstarter because I mean, I don't know how young fashion designers start up.
Me either. It's insane.
Yeah, it's, you know, they I mean, there's so much more admiration for them after this, you know, doing this project. We literally we couldn't fund it straight up, so we had to do a Kickstarter, and, you know, there were other sort of, you know, issues with it. We had to, you know, we had to charge a lot for it because we wanted it to be sustainable. We were, you know, really mindful of things being having the right you know, fabrics, and you know, we wanted it to be a piece that you bought and you kept it forever, but we didn't meet our target. And this, you know, this is business at the end of the day. There's some projects that work and some don't, but in a way we're so pleased that we did it that way. Otherwise, if we'd forked out all that money, yeah, and I'm sure a lot of designers do that, and it's pretty devastating for them if they don't, you know, make it back. But
absolutely. And with COVID as well, recently, I think there's probably a lot of designers who had just started and then have essentially been, you know, hopefully it's just a pause, but
yeah,
have probably been in that same situation with, because so much of the industry, and I don't think this is something that people talk about up front enough within like ready to wear or whatever, is a lot of the initial investments and costs are essentially upfront, and you have to, and then you wait months and months and months to recover, so you're not even sure if you'll always recover that money. And I've seen that with a few independent designers. So I think it's a really smart way, like you said, to kind of look at it and then go, okay, well, we can revisit that, and without sort of kind of plummeting yourselves into debt or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can happen.
Yeah. It's good to take risks, but, you know, not if it's gonna, you know, fold the whole business. So yeah, again, another balance, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. If we have any questions, this is the perfect time to chime in if you've got any questions for Kaz. But before we start wrapping up, I want you to know, why botanicals, by the way? Was there something
No, well, I mean, I grew up in the countryside, so I've always loved, my parents had quite a big garden, and I've always loved gardens and nature. But actually, no, it was a commission. It was actually a girl at Mr. Porter. She said, "Oh, I really like palm trees. Would you paint a palm tree?" And like I said, I throw the towel in on some things. I was like, I can't do it. I can't do palm trees. Basically, I'd never tried. So I did, and then I was like, oh, I like doing this more. And then then this is when like house plants all kind of kicked off, and there was a real trend for it among sort of younger people, and loads of Instagrams of house plants, and there was that quite big one called Plants on Pink, and I started to then experiment with colour in the background, and then it just felt like it had something behind it. It was like there's a lot of plants out there, and there's a lot of colours, so it felt like there was a bit of a theme. And if you pop on our website, we have this kind of grid of the kind of colours, moving from like blacks, pinks, blues, and it just feels like it has quite a strong aesthetic. So I think once we kind of done a few designs, it was like, oh, we've got something here, and I think in the future we might sort of branch out and do other things, pardon the pun, but I think at the moment there feels like there's a lot more to kind of explore. And yeah, I mean, I just love plot. I mean, you can tell I've got.
I was going to say it's very life imitating art with the scenery behind you.
Yeah, this looks a bit like a Game of Thrones kind of.
It looks like you live in sort of like an atrium. But one of the things I love about your Instagram, you guys are always going to certain like botanical gardens and places, and one of the places you always go is Barbican.
Yes.
And I think that's such it's wonderful, and I'm always like, I have to go because I really want to go see it for myself, because I don't think that's something that I think a lot of, dare I say it, there's a newer generation that I think are completely oblivious to kind of what's actually in the city of London and what's around them.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved sort of, even Topshop days on my day off, I would go into town and I would like, go to different areas, not necessarily gardens, but I just loved exploring. I think this is because I grew up in the countryside, and I didn't have that kind of access to things. And then since having the the brand, we've gone on lots of field trips. I think it's proving to be a little bit more difficult. I mean, obviously COVID, couldn't go anywhere, but it's difficult with the 2 kids now. It's not as easy. It's actually the elder one that is more difficult. The newborn just sleeps. But so we kind of, the Barbican's perfect because we can just drive there and park and then come home. But yeah, there's we're dying to go to Kew again, but we're just like, can we do it?
It's a day trip. That's a day trip.
Is going to have a meltdown, but yeah, so no, but it's all about the kind of inspiration through to the final piece is kind of what those field trips are for. So
no, it's nice. So we have one question come through. Do you have any tips or advice for someone who's maintaining a day job but wants to sort of start their sort of side hustle business?
Yeah, it's tricky. It really is. Like you have to be very, very motivated, and I think there's times when I wasn't, and I think that's when Brett coming into it has kind of helped you kind of work off each other. But I don't think that has to be the case. You don't need to go into starting a business and be a duo. I think you just need to really have that drive for it. And Brett and I've always said, since having a business, we absolutely encourage anyone to do it because it is just so rewarding. There's highs and lows though, even with like things like Instagram, you're like, I'm not getting enough likes, and you're like, oh no, what am I doing wrong? But you've literally just got to keep going with it. I think what's really important is to try to find, whatever it is that you want to do, find that aesthetic, find that kind of you know, style of something. You know, if it's a product, then, you know, try and just work on that beforehand and just, you know, kind of establish where you want to go with it. But 100% do it. It's just, it's so rewarding. But, you know, it's very tiring when you've had a day at work and then, you know, you might, you know, have to do some more work in the evening. But you know, it pays off. Well, you know, hopefully it pays off. But you know, mentally it does. It's just so much fun having something on the side to do as well.
Absolutely. I think in this day and age as well, where I think we're so conditioned to, not to say that what you're doing is a hobby, but I think that's such a lost art. Yeah. Finding things that you really love to do is such a lost art. We're so kind of like, you know, you go home and you might watch TV for 6 hours, but actually you could go home and do something that's really productive, something that you love, and then hopefully because of that kind of dedication and hard work, you're going to get something so much more rewarding back for it anyway. So you know, and I'm finding that I'm speaking to people like yourself who have started their own businesses, and they all sort of have that same mindset of kind of appropriating their time and kind of having just a different outlook of that idea of, you know what, the reward is so much better than me worrying about having a couple of more hours of work when I get home from the day job, because I'm getting so much more out of it at the other end, which is really, I think that's really encouraging, I think, for anyone who might think that actually I can't do it. It's just mindset.
No, definitely. It's I mean, it's certainly something that I would not have imagined I'd be doing, you know. It's just not, you know, having a business. I would have probably laughed about 10 years ago, but you know, it's just crazy. You just don't know what direction your kind of, you know, life is going to go in. So you know, in a positive way. So yeah, do it.
Oh well, that's been amazing. Honestly, I've been really like watching the journey, and actually someone said to me who a once club colleague said, oh yeah, I was just in the shop the other day and I bought these really nice cards, etc. They turned it over and they realized it was your cards. It was just so serendipitous. I was like, oh my gosh, and a little, I think there's a shop in East London, and I was like, I love to hear stuff like that, because it was,
I love to hear that. Yeah.
I'll ask her which ones they were, but she goes, oh, I picked them up, and I was like, oh, these are really nice, and she turned them over. She goes, oh, we're talking to her this week.
That's so lovely. Yeah, I mean, we always say we'd love to know where every single card has ended up. Like, where are they? It's just, it's so like,
oh, it sounds like a project coming.
Yes. That sounds quite long.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's really a pleasure. I mean, I've loved to see the journey for Stengun Drawings, but also just I think in terms of yourself and how we met, and how I know other people who've worked with you too, they always say the same thing, like one of the nicest people in the industry I've ever kind of come across or worked with. So you know, we love to see what you're doing, and we really, really appreciate your time today, especially with the small babies and everything. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon.
No, thank you. It's been really lovely, like, to like reflect on, you know, the kind of journey to getting here. And you know, this year I turned 40, so it's kind of like really you know, looking back at what, you know, I've done over the years. It's been great. So thank you.
Oh no, my pleasure, honestly. And I think it's not, I think that's one thing that we should all do more, is like kind of think about where you where you've come from and where you are now, and reflect and enjoy the wins, because you know, you should like celebrate yourself a little bit. So nice.
Totally. And I think that's what's so great about this, you know, that you're doing it. It's kind of doing it for everybody, and then who's listening, they're like, I should do that too. I think it's a really positive thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and I'll speak to you soon for sure.
Yes, thank you so
care.
much.
Bye everyone. Thank you.